Good afternoon. Firstly, I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us today. My name is Kristen Schreckenbach, Director of Wealth Solutions. Welcome to Vancity's 2024 Financial Literacy Month series of webinars. We'd like to begin by first acknowledging that Vancity operates on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, represented today by the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. They have been custodians of this land since time immemorial, and as visitors, we would like to start this webinar by paying our deep respects to both elders past, present, and leaders up and coming. So some of you may have already known that we have been hosting free webinars every Wednesday in the month of November. This year, the webinar series called Cultivating Wealth is focusing on various life stages, from accumulating wealth to the distribution of wealth. And today's webinar is the third in our series, Harvesting, the Preservation or Preserving Wealth. This webinar will be recorded and shared with all registered attendees. We will also post this on our YouTube channel following the event. And if you haven't already, please make sure you're following us on YouTube and our various social media platforms to stay connected and to get access to great content like this webinar. Lastly, we're encouraging all of you to engage with us throughout the webinar and take note of what's most valuable to you. The Q&A button allows you to submit a question, and we will be answering questions after the presentation. With that, I'd like to introduce to you our speakers for this webinar. Catherine Mandelkorn. Catherine is a certified financial planner and holds the Financial Management Advisor and Certified Money Coach designations. Catherine has 26 years in banking, investments, financial planning, and money coaching, specializing in coaching individuals, families, and businesses to use money in alignment with their values. As a regional manager of Wealth Solutions at Vancity, Catherine is committed to the accessibility of financial wellness and financial planning for all Canadians. Our other speaker is Sunny Nielsen. Sunny is a wealth advisor with Vancity Credit Union and Aviso Wealth. He is a certified financial planner with over 25 years of experience in the financial services industry. In addition to a master's degree from St. Mary's University, he also holds the Financial Management Advisor and Responsible Investment Specialist designations. Through a common sense and practical approach, Sunny is there for members and their families every step of the way. Sunny also has significant experience in retail lending, commercial banking, estate planning, education, technology user experience, and strategy. So with that, I'd like to pass it on to Catherine.
Thank you, Kristen. Move to the next slide, pretty. So as Kristen mentioned, this is the third in our series of 4 webinars for Financial Literacy Month. Our aim with this series has been to guide you through the different stages of life and highlight how finances can play a role in each. We have not only wanted to describe these stages to you, but also give you the knowledge and direction on how to manage your finances throughout your life events. And for you to know that there is a qualified and knowledgeable staff member at Vancity to help you at any stage of life. From building your finances right out of school to saving for your first home and then qualifying for a mortgage, managing your money as a newcomer to Canada, saving for kids' education, growing your wealth, investing your savings, managing a startup or your growing business, to planning for the unexpected and establishing goals for your future for retirement, and also laying the foundation for estate plans. It's a long list, but it's not an exhaustive list. As we've seen so far in this series, and as you well know how events come up in your own lives, there are so many stages and events in life, and money is often the center of each. So we encourage you to speak to any of our staff at Vancity because we do work as a team, and any of our staff can help you, or they can introduce you to somebody who can. So there's a QR code there on the screen that will take you to next week's webinar, but it also allows you to access the past recordings or past events. So next slide, please. So many of you likely heard the term financial planning, financial plan, Vancity advice plan. We've talked about that in the series of webinars as well. But what does it all mean? So let's start with defining financial planning. So all those life events that I just mentioned require some sort of planning, whether it's a conversation, calculations, or some in-depth planning and analysis. Financial planning is more than just a document you receive. It's important to think about it as a process rather than a one-time event. The document is part of the process. If you receive a financial plan, that is part of the process, but it isn't a prediction of how every aspect of your financial life will play out. Instead, it's like a roadmap to guide you. So let's indulge in the process for a moment. Imagine you've been working for years, saving for your goals, but you start to wonder, have I been saving enough? Or perhaps you're unclear about government pensions and how they can integrate with your plan, or how your savings will support your many conflicting goals. Or you've been saving diligently for your kids' education, and now that they're only 4 years away from graduating, you want to know, have I planned correctly? Have I saved enough? I could list different scenarios for hours. There are so many. There's many different life events that each of you will go through. And while some of these events might be common among many of us, your planning will be an entirely unique experience for you because your goals and your values will dictate how you want to allocate your money. The process of planning generally involves meeting with a planning professional, discussing your goals and values, providing financial statements if necessary, and then the planner does an analysis and strategy and presents options and solutions for you to take action on. It's important to understand that the process and the planning process is an illustrator. It's a snapshot in time. And it is recommended that you review your financial plan every 3 to 4 years, or 3 to 5 years rather, or when you go through a specific life event. So you can see how it's not just this one document that you receive and that's it. It's not a one and done. It's a process that you will go through and that it will evolve over time. And essentially, financial planning helps provide clarity. The process will help you see the bigger picture and set priorities regardless of your income or age. Next slide, please. So FP Canada, it sets the strategic direction for financial planning in Canada. It's the governing body for certified financial planners and qualified associate financial planners. And they do a financial stress index each year. So the 2024 Financial Stress Index, the findings reveal that Canadians who don't work with a financial professional are 33% more likely to be stressed about money than those who do, and 23% more likely to have lost sleep about their financial worries. In contrast, those who work with a financial professional are more optimistic about their financial futures, 56% of respondents, than those who don't, which was 48% of respondents. So I mentioned values and money previously. So knowing your values is essentially knowing what is important to you. I always say, do not underestimate this step in your financial planning journey. No matter where you are, no matter how you're feeling, it really is the foundation in which you will base your choices and decisions on. Because if you have a clear idea of what is important to you, then with the guidance of a planning professional, you'll be able to effectively allocate your money to your goals and what is most important to you. At its core, money is a tool. It is a medium of exchange by definition. But this tool can also stir up a heck of a lot of feelings and emotions. Money gives us power to make choices about where we live, how we spend our time, and what goals we prioritize. But it can also highlight how limited financial resources can restrict our ability to make decisions and pursue opportunities. And when money feels scarce, choices are often dictated by the immediate needs, what's happening right now, rather than the long-term aspirations, which leads to stress and limited options. Yet, even in the face of our real or perceived constraints, and I say perceived constraints because we may feel like we don't have enough, we may feel like we're scarce with money, but maybe we just haven't done the right planning to see that we are on track or we are okay. So even in the face of constraints, intentional planning can expand your choices over time. So I'll say this in a different way. When you give attention to your money and plan effectively, you create opportunities and reduce constraints, giving you greater alignment with your values and your aspirations. And when we can look at money through this lens as a tool that we can use to allocate to the areas that are most important to us, it reduces the feelings of scarcity and allows you to start feeling sufficient, like you have enough. So you're in the driver's seat of your life and the choices you make, but you don't have to do it all alone. A professional planner is trained to take a holistic view of your financial life and develop strategies that help you meet your goals. At Vancity, we call this a Vancity advice plan. You've probably heard this in passing, seen it. I definitely heard it on these webinar series. And we have wealth relationship managers, wealth planners, wealth advisors, and investment counselors at Vancity that are here to help you. And they work with you to create, implement, and adjust your Vancity advice plan as needed. Vancity advice planning helps you prioritize when you have competing goals and limited resources, or when you have surplus savings that you need to allocate to your goals. It also helps protect you and your family from the unexpected. And that's not to say that we can predict every life event, but with a plan, the goal is that you will have greater peace of mind. So with that, I would now like to pass the next part of the presentation over to one of our Vancity wealth advisors and certified financial planner, Sunny Nielsen. Sunny will speak to the stage of life where you are preserving wealth, how to plan for the future, and we'll walk you through what a Vancity advice plan process could look like. Sunny, over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. So that's a lot of information just to start with. But generally, when I meet with somebody or when my peers meet with people, we start with the end in mind. So we talk a little bit about what your dreams and what your goals are. And from that conversation, we can start to tease out and understand a little bit better what's that lifestyle you want to live, when you want to get there, how do we prepare for it? You know, it all starts with retirement planning. It is considered a foundational piece. And then we work backwards from there. We call this a pillar for the main reason is you don't want to outlive your money. You can't take it with you. And advisors such as myself, we focus on that end state, understanding your situation a little bit or a little bit more. Next slide, please. So when I do meet somebody for the first time, I like to say bombarded with questions. But these are probably the three most popular. So if you're playing Family Feud, I would say that the top three answers on the board here. When can I retire? Great question. How much do I need? Again, another great question. And when is that tipping point of when should I start taking the CPP or your Canada Pension Plan? And I like to say that's actually easy. I can answer all those questions with one answer, and it depends. Now, it sounds like a bit of a cop-out answer, but it really is because you are all unique. The question that I ask back when we start talking about these things is, what is the lifestyle that you're looking to achieve? Most people can't answer that. A lot of times you'll hear, how much do you want to have per month when you retire? But really it comes down to what is the lifestyle? And we want to make sure that we can match that lifestyle with the income to service that. Your lifestyle includes things such as your hobbies. When people go from working over to retirement, there's all that time. So there's going to be hobbies. What do your hobbies look like? What does that look like for you? Some travel, for example. You might also have some financial commitments when you retire, or even family commitments. So it's different for every person. So what is the same and a real life fear for a lot of people, and for good reason, is outliving your money. So that is something that we as financial planners, when we go through and start building this out, that's the key thing that we want to make sure that we identify. Okay, next slide, please. So Catherine touched on this really somewhat briefly, but there's considerations when we start building out. The first one is time. How much time do you have to save? And how long does it need to last? That's a difficult thing for a lot of people. It's not so much the time, it's about how long is it going to last. You know, I don't have a crystal ball, even though I like to say I do. But, you know, it makes, you know, looking about how long those funds need to be there to support your retirement is different for everybody. And that's, you know, through some questions that we start to understand a little bit more. Amount, how much do I need? I like to say there's 3 phases to retirement, and which most people don't quite realize. There's early retirement, which is, I like to say, the fun time, lots of travel, getting the RV, you know, things like that. Then you got the mid-retirement, which is I call stable retirement, where, you know what, you might not want to travel so much, you don't want to pay the medical costs, you don't want to have the hassles, you're just happy, you know, doing your hobbies at home. And then you get to your advanced retirement, which, you know, at times can be, you know, very rewarding, but also very financially challenging if you need help. So that is where, you know, we start to plan and look at those different aspects. You don't need to do this. That's what our job is. Next consideration is taxes. You know, when we present a plan and look for different routes to get you there, we're always looking for tax efficiency before and after, and also coordination of your benefits. You know, you've worked hard for your entire life. You know, now you want to reap the rewards. The last thing you want to do is have you at risk of losing some of those benefits or paying more taxes than you actually need to. The next consideration is inflation. Now, most people haven't really thought about inflation, you know, for a good, I would say 10, 12 years in the mid 2010s. But, you know, when coming out of COVID, we saw a lot of things happen. And one of the things that we saw happening was a huge spike in costs of everything. You got your housing, you got your food, and other things. So we want to make sure that we want to look at making sure that we stay ahead of inflation. Because the last thing you want to do is have to start to pull back on some of your needs or your lifestyle because things have just gotten too expensive for you. The next one's financial events. Have you planned for some of those events that have come up? You know, for example, helping a loved one. You know, we're seeing a large of the, you know, we call it baby boomer generation, where they're gifting some down payments for their children or even their grandchildren, which we maybe haven't seen previously. And that's something that we want to make sure that we, you know, bring that into the plan. And then the last consideration there is return. So when we consider all of those factors above, we as advisors and planners, we can start to look and say, okay, what do we kind of need to generate a return to make sure that you can support that? When it comes to retirement, income is a bit of a 3-legged stool. The first stool is your government pension. So that's your Canada Pension Plan and your old age security. The second one is your maybe through your employer, through your pension, your personal pension that you have. And then the third one is your personal savings. So when we look at that, we try to coordinate between those 3 to make sure that we can get you to that lifestyle that you're looking for. Okay, next slide. So I think this is an important thing to talk about, and I talk about it with all of my new members and potential members, is risk and volatility. And that's what really makes, you know, talk about return. So one, not all investments are the same. And we also recommend what's best for you. So we have this go through, because investments are on a spectrum. They're very safe to things that maybe don't have a guarantee or maybe have some volatility. You know, some of the factors that go in is timeline, like how long you're going to be invested for is a big one. Risk is more around the risk or the chance of default, you know, of something, you know, just collapsing. Volatility is just the change in price. You know, so when you look at, for example, the price of gas, very volatile. You see, you know, prices, you know, spike up and down all the time. And that's more your volatility. But at the end of the day, we're building something that suits you best. And that's why going back to starting with the end in mind, is it allows us to understand what is the return we need to generate to get you there. And then we have a conversation. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, here's a great example. So typical member, this is Jane. Jane's turning 65 and has done a great job saving up about $250,000 and would like to know how much she'll get. So she went to the Vancity website, saw through the investment piece that we have offer financial calculator to talk about how long will our money last. So, Jane filled this out and, she hit the enter button and it comes out that, based on a return of 4% over 25 years, Jane's going to get a payout of about $16,000. And that's great. But it didn't answer some of the questions that Jane had. So one, how does it impact Jane's taxes or my taxes? Like, I don't quite know. Is there a better way to structure this payout? How does this interact with Jane's Canada Pension Plan, old age security, and work pension? Now, the bigger real question is this enough to sustain Jane's lifestyle? So just doing this great exercise, Jane didn't feel like she was getting the answer she was looking for. So there's an opportunity to click and speak to an advisor. And that's where Jane came over to me. So next slide, please. So continuing with Jane, we can now break it down. Well, in my first conversation with Jane, I found out that Jane has a partner, and that's John. And John's already retired. Okay. How does this impact each other? They both share their incomes together. They share their banking together. So how does that impact each other? So I suggested a meeting for all three of us to sit down and have a conversation. So from that, we started to input all the goals. So I found out that, for example, Jane's looking to buy a new vehicle. I also inputted some of the other factors around time, lifestyle, amount, and inflation, beyond just return. So we look over time. So, that spectrum. A lot of people, when they think of retiring, they think it's I don't say coming to an end. It's just it's a new beginning. And retirement for many lasts a long, long time. So when I looked over it, we looked at not just Jane's retirement. We looked at, about purchasing that vehicle, but we also looked at forecasting some of our cash flow moving forward, taking into account the inflation and return and whatnot, just for making sure that she can have. Balancing all these things, we can now look to more of a recommendation or a pathway. We know the destination where we want to get to, but the route, how we get there, can change can change. And that is something we wanted to build within that. Also wanted to bring this out as a note. When it comes to couples, their goals always don't always align. And that's not a problem. That's very, very common. What is important is part of this process is that we can address the plan for each party. So for example, each different partner might have a different comfort level when it comes to a risk or a risk tolerance. That's something we want to make sure that we kind of bake in there. Okay, next slide, please. So from our conversation, we see there are some opportunities for Jane and John. So up until now, for example, they've been filing their tax returns separately. Moving forward, they should do it as joint, else it will allow them to do a pension split as John is getting a pension through his employer. So there's an allocation that he can attribute back over to Jane to overall reduce their taxes as a couple. In this case, Jane should actually start or defer converting her registered retirement savings plan to a registered retirement income fund, which you have to do at some point, but the government allows you to do it at age 71. So in this case, we're recommending that she do that. And that's because of some tax efficiency. We also see that John hasn't converted his RSP to a RIF. However, when it is time to do so, we will base the payments on Jane's age because she's younger. And this just gives you more options as planners to make sure that we can bring your income to a level where you're maximizing the amount of cash you're getting in your pocket at the end of the day from a tax, looking at your taxes as well. Now, when it comes time, Jane wanted to buy that car. We recommended that she actually buy the car from the funds sitting in her TFSA, tax-free savings account, because the lump sum withdrawal is not going to be taxed for her. So something maybe she didn't think of. Speaking of their TFSAs, both Jane and John both have available room in their TFSAs and should transfer their non-registered funds. So that's money that's not in an RSP or a TFSA into it. It's going to realize some tax efficiency on the growth. Based on that last little snippet that I showed, they have a small shortfall when it comes to retirement. It said 94%. So that's when we're calculate to see how long your money's going to last. In this case, it looks like Jane's funds are going to run out when she turns about 89. Now, we can make this up by targeting maybe a little bit higher return. But at the end of the day, I like to say my job is to do two things really well. One is to eat well and sleep well. So we want to make sure we generate you the return to make sure you can live the lifestyle you want. However, if it's keeping you up at night, we need to address that and have a conversation, because the last thing we need is for you to worry about your investments. Moving forward, we can see other values such as having a will and some estate planning. And not jumping the gun, but that's more that we'll talk about on the next financial literacy seminar next week. But we'll actually be going over this a little bit more, around the distribution of wealth seminar. Okay, next slide, please. So it really comes down to the value of a financial plan. Those who follow a financial plan have a net worth, or, once you have all of everything you own minus everything you owe, that's your net worth, but about 2.7 times more than somebody who doesn't. It addresses your needs across a full spectrum, a timeline holistically. So we're looking at all your full financial situation, all your goals, all your dreams, and then forecasting it out for a period of time. Working with an advisor is kind of like, I joke with my members about this, is being like a financial physician. So I help diagnose and then create a treatment plan for you to get you there. Catherine had said that, we should be reviewing a financial plan. I like to say review it, at least annually. But as she did say as well, is those financial intersections in life, a marriage or a birth of a baby or marriage or whatnot, lots of different things. But the thing is, it allows us as advisors to sit down and course correct. The destination we know, the route to get there might look a little bit different, and that's where we can adjust it. And I guess at the end of the day, financial success for you is just achieving the goals that you have in life. And that's what we're here for. Okay, so next slide. Pass it back for maybe some questions and answers. Q&A.
Thank you, Sunny. So we have a few questions here. So just a reminder, before I get to the questions, a reminder, you can pop questions into the Q&A chat. They are not published. They come to us directly. So feel free to ask anything you want. It's sort of a half an hour to ask a wealth advisor. Before we jump to some of the questions that are there, Sunny, I took some notes while you were speaking, so you had a lot of great takeaways. You mentioned on that first slide was, there's all these things all questions you may get from members about retirement, but to sort of pull it back and stop to put it back to them to say, what kind of lifestyle are you looking to achieve? I like that a lot, because there aren't, and you can tell me how you feel about this and approach to it. When it comes to individual planning, rules of thumb kind of go out the window. They're great for, writing articles and books and things like that. But to have a rule of thumb that's one thing fits all, one theory, one calculation fits all isn't the way that you want to go about financial planning, because it really comes down to, what do you want to achieve? What are your goals? What's important to you? What does lifestyle look like? And then you as the planner can create some strategy to support that.
Yeah, definitely. And just to kind of add to that piece, and that's why I talk about the phases of retirement, because
Hmm.
what it looks like in your 60s, it looks completely different than in your 80s. And that's something that we need to look, at least have a conversation about and make amendments or adjustments for.
Right. And for our viewers too, when they come to do that planning, let's say they're 40 years old and they want to look to the future, and you're talking about those 3 phases of retirement, are you able to then look forward into those phases in doing an analysis and doing a projection? How do you approach that? If you could sort of break that down a bit.
Okay,
Person who's
so
wondering what to do.
for example, I asked them to describe their lifestyle today, what they think, that they want to do tomorrow. We talk a little bit about their family history. It can be a little sensitive, but we talk about that too. We talk about, when they're thinking of, for example, retiring, and I ask or questions about such as, what are you going to be doing? Tell me a little bit more about that. And at the end of the day, it's a great dialogue to have, because when people come to me generally, they ask me a question, but they're not really asking me the question behind the question. Do I have enough to retire? I'm like, well, what are you going to do in retirement? Like, tell me a little bit about that. So I think that's where many times we'll start a conversation, but we actually won't finish that part of it for sometimes a few weeks, because they go back and they sit and reflect. And I cannot tell you how many times I've had somebody come back to me a week or two later after I presented a plan to say, you know what, my husband and I, we've had a conversation. You made us think about this. Maybe that's not what we're looking for. And I'm not saying that's great, but that's great in the sense that they've had that conversation. And, that financial plan, and we're always going to make sure that we make amendments and adjustments along the way, because we know we're going to get you there, but what that pathway looks like is going to look different for everybody.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so important to ask those questions of ourselves, right? Because it's not all about the numbers. The numbers are important, but really, how are we using those numbers to support the things that we want to do? Otherwise, it's so easy to get into this sort of train of, I need more, I need more, I need more. And then you never feel like you have enough. Whereas through this process, like you said, you go away and think about it for a couple of weeks, but such an important time and space to be able to give yourself to think about those things, because you might not know. You might think you're coming in to talk about one thing with your advisor, and then you've steered them in a different direction to actually think about, how do I want to plan for the future? What's important to me?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you also said at the end, sort of led off with, what does financial success look like to you? I really like that statement. Yeah. So I encourage everybody who's watching, no matter what phase and stage you are of your life and your financial journey, is, what does that look like to you? It's not the same for everybody, and it doesn't always mean having, loads and piles of money. It's like, what does financial success look like to you? There's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I'm going to jump to a couple questions here. First one is, can I do a financial plan with just my financial pieces, or do I have to do one jointly with my partner? What are your thoughts on that, Sunny?
So it comes down, I like to say, if you're commingling your funds, it makes it a little bit more challenging if you do them separately. Many times I start with one partner, and then I end up, we start to go down a path, and then we end up backing up to include the other partner in as well. It happens all the time. Can you do it? Yes. But it just comes down to some unknown factors then. And then that's where, if we start talking about coordinating between the two, and also what I had said, sometimes goals are different. You have one person that wants to deal with one person, you have the other person that wants to deal with the other, and that's fine. So you can, but it does, you just lose a little bit of those efficiencies being able to share them together.
Okay. I've got another one here. So here's one. So how do I find out my limits for my RSP and TFSA? I'm assuming the contribution limits.
Yeah. So if you sign on to your My Service Canada account, so www.canada.ca, and then you go through all the prompts. When you log in, it will give you both what your RSP contribution limit is, as well as what your TFSA limit is outstanding. So That's where you get both numbers. When I do a plan, it is something I ask for them to do it. And if they don't know how, I send them the prompt on, how to click through. But yeah, that's how you get it.
Good. Thank you. Some technical questions rolling in. You mentioned, or maybe didn't mention, but the OAS clawback, this question is around. So what is the OAS clawback? So the old age security.
One of my favorite topics. So,
Oh,
at age 65, if you've been a resident in Canada, you're for a period of time, you're allowed to claim the old age security. Works, with your CPP or Canada Pension Plan. But if you make too much money, they're going to start pulling it back. When I say they're, CRA. So when you get over a certain threshold for either an individual or a couple, they start to do a bit of a clawback. So what that means is for every dollar you earn above that threshold, they take 15 cents off your OAS. And at a point in time, or not a point, but at a certain income level, it's completely wiped out. You lose it for that year, you might qualify again for the next year. We do see a lot of people with OAS clawback for two big reasons. One is they sell property, real estate property, whatnot. They trigger a very large capital gain. So, that's one. The second one is they have fantastic pensions and whatnot, where they've just gotten a lot, or maybe interest income from non-registered investments. Planners or advisors such as myself, we look at those scenarios to say, okay, how do we bring you back under the threshold? Because the last thing I want to do is threaten your benefits. And if there's an opportunity to make sure that you're not crossing over, great. You're not then having that penalized amount taken off.
That had me thinking too, when you mentioned in your example of Jane and John. And I think you were talking about the RIF payments, and you were saying how, using Jane's age for John's RIF payment, using the younger spouse. And those are little nuances, right, that one may not think about or know to look for. And so using and leaning on your financial professional to be able to help identify those little areas for tax savings. They may seem little, because I'm sure I heard that as you spoke about it, but it might have been a throwaway for some. But knowing that those little, I don't say little, but they, small things that we can identify could actually have a really big impact on the long term. So not feeling like one has to do it all by themselves.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And it's the same with the OAS clawback, right? Those things, we hear about it. It can be something that we may worry about, but with some intentional planning, you can identify where that could happen and then have some tax planning in that year.
Yeah. Definitely. Our good job is to make sure that we get you the most dollars in your pocket at the end of the day.
Right. Okay. More questions. This one's around CPP, so Canada Pension Plan. I hear I get a reduction if I take it early. Can you explain, or can you explain?
Yeah. So Canada Pension, if you worked in Canada over age 18 and you've contributed, they start to collect that amount that you paid into it. You are the normal age, I want to say normal, because I'll explain this, but the age of retirement in Canada is 65. So that's when you would get your entitlement. However, Canadian government allows you to take it up to 5 years early. So you can take it as early as age 60. However, if you were to take it at age 60 versus 65, because now you're taking it for a longer period of time, there is a reduction. So the reduction works out to be about 0.6% per month. So for example, if you take it at age 60 instead of 65, you're going to erode about 36% of what your final pension would have been at 65. So you get about 64%. Now, going back to the example where I said, when's the right time to take CPP? Depends on your situation. If you have income, if you're still working, life expectancy. But when we, look at that, we take that in account, or we bake it into your financial plan, and we actually tell you what we think is the most efficient path for you. And when I say that the regular retirement age is 65, majority of Canadians start taking it at 60 though. So sometimes Um, Unfortunately, they don't have a conversation with an advisor or a financial professional first, because if you go through the website and there's a calculator you can use, when I say the website, the Canada.ca website, they don't give you advice of which is better. So even if you call, they'll tell you to go, they'll direct you back to the website. But that's where it's having a talk and a conversation, such as with an advisor, is to say, hey, here's scenario A, here's scenario B. This is where it's looking at. This is what it's looking like. And I think that is such an important thing, especially when more than half Canadians start taking it at age 60.
Okay. And then for our viewers, is that something that, if that is a question, let's say turning 60 in a few months, and I've got this question of when do I take it now? Do I take it later? Is that something that you can look at with, do you need to do a plan? Is that done in isolation? How as a planner do you approach that?
So generally you would need to go through the steps of a plan. Now, when we, just talking, the plan could be very, sounds intimidating. However, it doesn't take a lot of information for us to be able to start to provide some really strong direction. And just from taking, for example, are you still working or are you not working? What type of pension have you built up? How much are you going to have to rely on that pension when you retire? Like, do you have a private pension? Do you have a bridging benefit? So these are the kind of questions that we ask. We don't expect you to know. And that's why it's great to have that conversation. I like to say that directionally, we can be able to answer that question. After a meeting and a half, we can start to kind of poke you in the right direction.
Okay. Thanks. I sort of set you up for that one because we have another question around financial planning. So this viewer said, I've been told I should do a financial plan, but I was given a very long document fact finder to fill out, and I still haven't done it. Is this what we need to do at Vancity in order to do a Vancity advice plan?
Short answer is no. I too would get scared if somebody threw a huge document at me. I call it the 222. Maybe that's just me that calls it. So I think it's off the old Chuck Woolery thing. He had the 22, but I call it 2 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days. I don't want you, I'm going to ask you lots of different questions. I'm going to ask you maybe to collect some information for me. I don't ask for you to spend 2 minutes on it. And if I'm going to ask you to spend 2 days on it, well, that's just ridiculous. So I usually say, if you can spend about an hour pulling this information together for me, but most of that information I'm going to be able to collect from you, your demographic information and whatnot. I'm looking more for, what do you have available in your RSPs, or what room do you have in your TFSAs? Those are kind of questions that I would like you to dig for a little bit. But when it comes to those fact finders, yes, that I like to say that's the utopia, to have all your information together. But really, if I have about 90%, two things. One, it's not going to take you very long to pull together 90%. And number two, I'm going to be pretty much 90% certain on what the direction and the recommendations we need to do. Because what we find is a lot, I'm not saying it's wasted effort, but a lot of the information that we do end up collecting is really not required to answer the questions that you're looking to have answered.
Right. Yeah, because a form can be a long form, even if it's 3 pages, can be really daunting for people to fill out. So I think it's important to know, if you have questions, just come and talk to somebody, talk to the financial professional. And from there, like what you described, Sunny, you're able to ask those questions and draw out the information you need to do the analysis or the projections or the feasibility analysis, is so that really a member is really just asking the questions so that you know what to solve for. That's the way I look at it. Yeah. Okay. Okay, another question. I think this may have come up in another webinar as well. It's a common one and it's a good one. What is better to save in a TFSA or an RSP?
Great question. I probably have, I answer that question probably every week. So RSPs are really meant to be an income source over time. TFSAs are a great way to save for something as a lump sum. So for an example, you put money in an RSP, you get tax deduction, you pull it out, it's considered income. Many people use RSPs for the wrong reasons. It should be there to replace your income when you get to where you need it. But for example, going back to Jane's example, she's looking at purchasing a vehicle. Well, that's a one-time lump sum purchase. TFSAs put the money in, no tax deduction, grows tax-free, just like an RSP. But when you pull it out, it doesn't add to your income. It's not considered income. So something like that won't threaten your benefits, won't increase, your taxes or your marginal tax rate. And that's what it's really designed for. So both have their usage. They're both great tools or investment vehicles to get you where you need to be. But that is the fundamental difference between the two.
Okay. So it sounds like it depends, but it really depends on what
I know. I
your
feel like
savings for.
I feel like it's always such a cop-out answer, is I'm always saying, well, it depends. How much does it cost for a boat? I don't know.
Depends. Yeah, but it really does depend, because it comes back to, it depends on what your goals are. Like, what are you planning for? There isn't this one right way to do things, and it really is, how do we use the tools and the accounts available to us to match what you want to plan for. Yeah. Okay. And what's so great about, and you can speak to any financial professional, what I love too about Vancity is that we've got these tools and resources available to you. It's an added value as a member. You're not paying for a plan. You're able to come and ask these questions. And, if you're meeting with a wealth planner, but they may find you need to speak to a different member of the team, you're able to get those resources within one place. So you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know how to do it all by yourself. Don't be afraid to ask. I think we've got another question. I think we might have gone through. You mentioned with couples, goals don't always align, Sunny, when you were speaking. How do you, this kind of ties into the other question, but how as an advisor and a planner, do you plan for those? So if the question is, my partner and I don't have the same ideas around retirement. How do we plan for this, and do we come in separately, or do we do this together? So similar to the other question, but it sounds like they want to do this together, but they've got different ideas of what the end looks like.
Yeah, I'd say ultimately, first thing you do is acknowledge that there's a difference and you call it out. So when we sit down, we say, okay, it looks like you're both on the same page. I'm not saying you need to be on the same page, and that's just the nature of relationships. So one is acknowledging that. Two is you can still build them out holistically where they connect, but there's going to be some nuances that are different. So for example, couples that keep their money separate. So we can still do a full financial plan that kind of relates to each other. But we know, when I talk about the destination, we know the destination, but now their paths, they're not going to be on the same path together. It might be some divergence there. So you might have two separate paths coming to the same place, but we really need to recognize that not everybody has that same sense. Not everybody shares their money. Not everybody has the same risk. We call it profile. Not everybody has the same goals. One spouse might want to retire earlier than the other. So those are the kind of things that we build in, and we can still connect them, but there's definitely some maybe tasks that we'll do individually. Okay,
fantastic. Thank you. We had a couple of questions come in just speaking about when you were talking about the reduction in CPP. This question is, does the reduced amount continue at 65, or is it recalculated? So once you take it early, is it early forever?
I would like to say it gets reinstated, but no. It's one of those, I would say it's a bit cruel, because once you make the decision, you're done. You made the decision. It is that forever and ever and ever. Now it might get adjusted a little bit because of an increase from just the cost of living adjustment that they do. So that would be the only increases. So moving forward, no.
And does the government of Canada do the cost of living adjustment increases every year?
So they have some factors they look at based on an inflationary basket or a consumer price index. And if it's above a certain point, then they do. If it's below a certain point, then they don't. Recently, as we've been seeing, they do adjust those numbers on what is the trigger point, but it changes every year. So again, it's hard to say, and that's why it's such an important conversation to have, because it's such a big decision.
Yes.
With that question that comes up, I always say, easy answers, it depends, and they're like, oh, they roll their eyes, and I'm like, well, this is the kind of things that we need to be thinking about. And one of the things which is extremely difficult is how long you're going to live for. It's a sensitive conversation, and that's what really is one of the big factors.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, it's we don't know. It's the unknown, so it's taking a calculated assumptions. Right? Yeah. So the summary to that is, once you take it early, anywhere between 60 and 65 at the reduced amount based on how many months prior to 65 that you take it, that is the reduction. It does not recalibrate or change at 65 going forward, just for
now
viewers.
On the flip side, if you defer past 65, they give you a bonus. So, instead of 0.6% per month reduction, you get a 0.7% increase per month that you defer it up to age 70. So you can do that for both your CPP and for your OAS. So if your OAS, the deferment is 0.6% above past 65. But the fact is, when I have conversations, if you want to continue to work, a lot of people do. We might say, hey, this might be, if they don't have a private pension or through an employer, or they maybe haven't not had the opportunity to build up a personal savings, they might want to continue to work. So one of the things that we say is, from a tax perspective, you might want to defer, build that up a little bit of a bonus, and then when you do retire, you have both more Canada pension as well as old age security.
Yeah, you mentioned the deferring the old age security after 65, but to clarify, one cannot take it before. Old age security is taken at 65. There's no reduction if you take it early, correct? It's at 65 that you can receive.
But you can defer it from up to age 70.
Okay. I think we've got time for another question. This is when you were speaking about RSPs and TFSAs. Can you speak about a FHSA?
So first home savings account, and we have not talked about a registered disability savings plan either, but a first home savings account was just introduced last year into the budget to allow people to get into their first home. So very much, it's a bit of a hybrid between a TFSA and an RSP. So what it is contributions you put in are tax are considered a deduction against your income, just like an RSP. The growth, while it's in there, just like an RSP, just like a TFSA, grows tax free. But when you pull it out, it's not considered income. So but if the use or the mandated use is to purchase a home. So very cool new thing that's been introduced to help people get into that first home.
Okay. And on the Vancity YouTube page, I believe we've got a recorded webinar on FHSAs as well. And any of the staff members going into branches, if you have questions around FHSAs, to say that one slowly, that you'll be able to ask questions to your advisor, planner, or any of the branch staff as well. Okay. Right. I think we will leave it there for questions. Thank you so much, Sunny. Appreciate answering those questions. To all of you watching, if you have more questions, again, I know I probably said it a few times and I'll say it again, don't hesitate to ask. Sometimes we're afraid to ask those questions that we maybe feel like we should know the answers to. Make an appointment, go into a branch, ask your financial professionals, and if they don't have the answer, they will know which professional to connect you with. Got one more slide. Wonderful. Thank you. So there's a QR code again there that will allow you to it'll bring you to the page where you can register for next week's webinar. So it is the fourth in our series of 4 of Cultivating Wealth. The next one is Sharing the Harvest, and the theme is distributing wealth. So we'll be talking to one of our investment counselors and wealth advisors to give us another hour of information. And that is next Wednesday from 12 till 1. So with that, thank you all for joining. And we'll see you next week. Hi,
Hi, are we good? Or
we are good. Did I start this meeting? I didn't
I
mean
don't
to.
know.
Oh, there, pretty. I might have clicked on something then.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
we can. It's Pretty's wondering if we want to connect. So
Sure.
yeah, we'll set off this one.
Okay.